Now, the big question for the Utah Jazz this coming season has been, should they keep the path they're going, or should they possibly blow it up? Now, I've talked in the past about them going ahead and just waiting until the trade deadline to see where they stand in the standings and then deciding whether they want to go ahead and tank or they want to go ahead and make a playoff push. But in all honesty, that doesn't do them enough justice, because I found that they are quite comparable to the Boston Celtics team back when Danny Ainge used to be over there in their front office, when they also had brought in Kyrie Irving and Gordon Hayward. Now, obviously, you had a baby Jason Tatum, you had a baby Jaylen Brown, you still had Al Horford for a period of time. They had a commodity of great young talent, and they had a couple older, more veteran guys that were also really crafty and skilled at their particular roles in the NBA. That being said, they thought that they could take an approach of just win now while bringing the young guys along so they can get valuable experience and also contribute to those wins. And unfortunately, it crashed and burned in one of the most hilarious ways that NBA history has ever seen. But later on, we see the Celtics now having obviously a much more mature and aged version of that young core, and Al Horford still being there, now bringing in Kristaps Porzingis and bringing in Drew Holiday, which has afforded them the ability to be a top team in the East this upcoming season, and one that is arguably a favorite alongside the Milwaukee Bucks to win the championship, or at the very least represent the East in the finals. Now, when I look at this particular Jazz roster compared to theirs, obviously we don't have the big names of the Kyrie Irving and the Gordon Hayward, but the closest thing we have to that would probably be Lowry and Colin Sexton. While Colin Sexton hasn't exactly worked out as much as they originally planned to, because both of those players were requested specifically in the trade that sent Donovan Mitchell to Cleveland, Lowry actually exploded on the scene, whereas Colin Sexton kind of took a little bit more of a back seat and now seems sometimes to be on the trading block. Though in this last preseason game, him going off was just beautiful to see. Him catching the lob from Chris Dunn, him just giving the effort plays and shouting afterwards after he got the offensive rebound in the lay. It was just great. And the finesse layup where he just scoops around going from left to right. It was just a thing of beauty. Now, when it comes to Colin specifically at this point, it seems like his future's kind of up in the air, but it looks like they're going to keep them on all the guards together on the roster for now. And I haven't seen any big rumors that seem substantial enough for me to go ahead and give merit to them and just call out to them. That being said, we know that they do see a future of running a possible 4-guard lineup with Walker Kessler at the center spot, or even Lowry or John Collins, just depending on how they're feeling. But that's going to be an experimental thing that makes you wonder, do they think they can really make a genuine playoff push this year? And for me, myself, I do personally believe so. I know a lot of analysts don't consider the Jazz to be a playoff ready team. Most people, including ESPN, didn't even have them in the top 10 going into this season for the Western Conference, which I found to be quite interesting. And obviously ESPN's list didn't make a lot of sense because they're just going for clicks, it seems like at times. But with that being said, I think that the Utah Jazz have as much talent as a lot of other teams. Of course, maybe not quite top 4 if you want to say, because you do have the Lakers, you do have the Nuggets, and you do have the Suns. But if you go a little bit further down that list, when you get to around the 6th in the West, that's when you start seeing more of a level, balanced out type of offensive and defensive matchup between the teams. That being said, I think this first game of the season against the Sacramento Kings, who obviously did finish first in the Pacific Division last season, will show as a true test to see what we can expect for them going forward, because this isn't going to be a blowout. This isn't going to be a wax fest. It's going to be 2 genuinely well-coached teams, and teams with very good young players and solid veterans going at it, going toe-to-toe, ready to start the season out on the right foot and get a good win in the win column, because they're both going to need it in this competitive Western Conference. Now, that being said, I know we don't want to give too much merit to the preseason, but I believe that's the best thing that we have right now to go off of, because the regular season hasn't started. And I did do a game review in the very beginning when they first played, but I wanted to wait until after the preseason finished for me to go ahead and just look at what everybody's been doing. Now, Lowry obviously led the team with 16.8 points in only 20 minutes, while he also had 8 rebounds. Walker Kessler had 6.4 rebounds, and Talen Horton-Tucker was actually the second leading scorer, despite having a kind of hot and cold preseason setup at 14 points. Then he went Colin Sexton with 11, and Keontae George finishing out with 10. Keontae George also led them in minutes, which he did need, because that's going to be a very good sample size of film for them to go over and just figure out whether they can play him earlier, how many minutes per game they can play him, or if he's going to have to take more of a backseat role. Because right now, to me, Chris Dunn is unbridledly the best point guard they have on the roster, pound for pound. He's the best defender by far. He's a very solid player when it comes to making decisions with the ball in his hands, whether it be him shooting the rock, but he shot it on a ridiculous 85.7% from the field, which you can obviously not expect him to do in the regular season, but you can understand that he is by far a more efficient player than most options that most teams will have. That being said, we know what Walker Kessler is, we know what Lowry is, we know what John Collins is, we know what a lot of these guys are, particularly in the front court, and then you have Taylor Hendricks and Kelly Olynyk off the bench. And then once you work out the guard issues, that's really what's going to decide whether this team is worth believing in at this moment. I think this is a playoff team and they should be capable of playing as one. And the only thing that I could really see getting in their way, because I do believe Will Hardy is a very good coach, despite this just being his second year as a head coach in the NBA, injuries are the only thing that can harm them at this. Now, I don't expect them to be a major thing for them in particular, but it also depends on what kind of lineups they run and how efficient those lineups actually end up being. Because it's one thing to run something in the preseason or in training camp against your own guys, and it's an entirely another to run it in the regular season when people need wins and they're going to try and get wins because people don't want to lose their jobs and other people want to get paid more. With that being said, this team has a lot of depth, and I think that the big thing that has a lot of people not paying attention to them is the fact that they have just a lack of star power. Now, obviously, we do know that Lowry bust on the scene last season and really just showed out, went above and beyond anything that anybody had ever expected from him. But at the same time, I think that we're going to need another star from the guards to really push them over the hump. Now, it is a thing to pay attention to Walker Kessler's play because obviously he is going into his sophomore season and they say there's a sophomore slump. For him, he didn't really start all the NBA games last season, but he did play in all of them. I think that he is going to be a guy that really, his development is going to determine how good this team is or how bad they are, because they're really one injury away or one bad player having a bad year away from just being a lottery pick team. And while that's okay because they have a lot of draft capital, I think that they're going to try and win as many games now and prove that they have had the most successful rebuild in the shortest window of time the NBA has ever honestly seen. Now, obviously, the Trailblazers did something special when they traded away Damian Lillard and got a surprisingly decent package for everything and flipped a couple pieces that they got after the fact to get even more draft assets and players. But I still lean towards the Jazz because they just got the most and they still have more down the road that's going to be more significant once it comes. So for me personally, it's a no. I'm definitely not blowing up the Utah Jazz roster, especially not. I probably wouldn't even blow it up at the end of this year. Now, might you want to make a trade at the deadline if they do end up, having 1.5 times as many losses as they have wins? I could see that. If somebody does get significantly injured, you might want to go ahead and make a trade, or you might want to just go ahead and wait it out and give it next year, because there's nothing that's forcing them to go ahead and go this year, because it's going to be impossible for them to win the championship considering how deep everybody else is. They also have the youngest roster, so they have a couple of years to really get things going, get everybody on the same page, and make the push that they need to make and just adjust things in lineups as they go. They're a young roster there. All their key pieces are young. Even Lowry is in his mid-20s, so it's not as though he's going to completely fall off the face of the earth anytime soon. I think their oldest key piece would likely be Chris Dunn, but the most important thing about Chris Dunn is that he has been a journeyman and he's finally healthy. In my opinion, they definitely have a ways to go, but I definitely think that they're a playoff ready team right now. So there's no need to force anything if you don't have to. But I also wouldn't go ahead and trade away Lowry, even though there is a significant age gap between, say, him, Walker, and Keontae. I'm not going to go ahead and push Lowry for more assets because Lowry is the engine of this team. He's the reason why they overachieved last year. And I think that he's going to be the reason that they continue to overachieve and beat everybody's expectations. And to go ahead and just trade him away would be counterproductive in my opinion, because the reason why you are where you are is because of Lauri Markkanen and Walker Kessler. Now, obviously, Walker came on late last year, but when he came on hot. He was that defensive presence that replaced Rudy Gobert. At the very least, maybe 75% of what he did defensively, but offensively, his bag's already better. He's less awkward when he moves on the court just in general, so you don't really have very many concerns about injury-wise, I would say. And he has more upside because he's going to be able to shoot a jumper. I genuinely believe that from the bottom of my heart. And there's no reason why we don't see him hit more threes than Rudy's ever hit in his career this upcoming season. So I don't see a reason why they wouldn't keep going this path. And I think that this team just has genuinely the most talent that they've had in some time. And I think this is the most well-rounded roster they've had in years. I think that, yes, you traded really 2 stars for 2 stars and then some. If that's the beginning of the rebuild and they're already right here, I'm not blowing it up again because we already saw them go through multiple changes last season. I think at the trade deadline, you might trade 1 or 2 pieces if you want to shake things up. But if this roster plays out how Will Hardy thinks it will, and if what he's cooking actually work, keep running it. And I think that they're capable of doing that. They're going to give everybody a run for their money. There's not a team that's going to absolutely slaughter them or landslide them because they match up well against a lot of teams. That being said, their length is something that's going to be very tantalizing. And I look forward to seeing them play a much larger defensive unit at times. And even when they decide to go small ball, I think they have the ability to be quick enough on the defensive side of the ball to not get completely floored, but also on offense to be efficient enough to make it worthwhile to even run a lineups like that to begin with. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you think the Jazz are a guaranteed playoff team right now. Let me know if you think there's something else that could prevent them from being one aside from injuries. And let me know if you think that you would like to see them just develop their young talent more this year and not focus on winning games. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so other like-minded people can check this video out as well. And as always, good morning, good evening, good night, no matter where you are on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you guys in the next one.